Their last birthday party in Malacanang Palace, Imelda Marcos sings for her friends. Another birthday celebration. Ferdinand Marcos and Imelda throw a palace party for their grandchildren. A rare New Year's Day visit to Malacanang by one of Marcos' strongest critics, this is the last time the two met face to face. And at the palace disco, actor George Hamilton, a frequent guest, danced the night away with Imelda. A look at their private lives as captured at the until now private videos of the Marcos family shot by the palace cameraman. The extravagant lifestyle being exposed in greater detail than ever before. Today, volunteer tour guides got their first glimpse of the Marcos residence. In awe, Imelda's vast wardrobe, her 2,200 pairs of shoes, the designer dresses, some from Rome, only days before fleeing, she placed her last $80,000 order. In awe, even Imelda's bathroom, filled with dozens of baskets of expensive soap and perfume.
When you behold all of these gowns and shoes and bags, I don't know how she can wear all of them.
On Friday, Malacanang and its wealth will be open to the public, the first thousands of visitors to be drawn from the poor and hungry of the city. From the private video, it appears the thoughts of the poor were far from the sheltered world of the Malacanang. At one of the last palace parties, Marcos' friends and staff sang We Are the World, but the pop anthem for the world's hungry became instead a birthday song for an aging dictator.
Jim Laurie, ABC News, Manila.
The celebrations continue in the Philippines tonight. There's a new president and Ferdinand Marcos has fled the country. Ferdinand Marcos is a man without a country tonight. After 20 years as president of the Philippines, Marcos, his family, and some political associates have fled Manila. Their first stop was Clark Air Force Base. That's one of the two big U.S. bases in the Philippines. After switching airplanes, they left for Guam. That's where they are right now. Marcos left behind a nation rejoicing. Tens of thousands of people poured through the streets of Manila and other large cities all day and all night. They danced and sang and chanted the name of their new president, Corazon Aquino. There was some violence. A mob broke into the presidential palace briefly until Aquino assistants urged them to leave and supporters of Marcos were viciously attacked in the streets. For her part, Corazon Aquino asked Filipinos to help her rebuild the country. The sun is now set for the Philippines that for the very first time in over 20 years is not being ruled by Ferdinand Marcos. Former president fled today to the island of Guam. He is being examined tonight at the U.S. Naval Hospital there. Marcos, seen here in one of his last TV appearances before the fall, left the Philippines aboard a U.S. Air Force jet with the former military commander Fabian Vert and an entourage of 55. The White House has now recognized Corazon Aquino's government, and tonight the acting governor of Guam is saying that Marcos will leave his island tomorrow, possibly for a life exile in Hawaii.
We are finally free, and we can be truly proud of the unprecedented way we achieved our freedom, with courage and with determination, and most important, in peace.
Back in 1986, a revolution happened, where the most part is non-violent and the most part joyous. As the late President Cory Aquino mentioned, the country was free at last and how proud they were for how bloodless the revolution was. Finally achieving freedom with courage, with determination, and with peace. When President Corazon Aquino ascended into power, ending Marcos' authority, it signaled a new era for Filipinos. The peaceful manner by which Aquino came into power drew the attention of the neighboring countries, giving admiration not only for her, but for the Filipino people as well. It's being called the revolution had just smiled, the almost bloodless end to over 20 years of rule by the Marcos government. It amazed a lot of people even outside the country that there was little violence occurred in this historic event. A lot of people were thinking that Marcos only did it just so he could stay in power for as long as he can. But after almost 20 years of ruling the country, it ended as the Filipinos joined together for a peaceful revolution. Filipinos then celebrated the victory of the new president, Cory Aquino. Before Marcos fled the Philippines, he desperately urged the White House to see the Marcos Aquino government, but the administration refused. In fact, they seldom had a chance to choose between an undesirable thug in power and a democratic middle. They usually have to pick the right-wing person. They stated that in this occasion they have a democratic middle, hence declining Marcos' plea. People have watched and saw the Marcos regime crumbling and how the Aquino government took control. One stated that they like to show that the Americans taught the Filipinos democracy, but in that time the Filipinos taught the world instead. A few lives were lost, but the struggle against the repressive Marcos regime lasted about 2 decades and finally were free from it. And no one can forget the price was paid. It is such an uplifting thing to happen for everybody that the right will definitely overcome in the end.
The peaceful times between the sudden change in leadership was short. The effects of a bloodless revolution was astounding. People weren't afraid to show their joy in the streets. But that had to come to an end when the military was in disarray. With the results of the snap election, changes were bound to happen, and the changes were drastic. The former president fled the country without leaving any last words to the country he left in shambles and to his opponent. With the bittersweet conclusion of a long reign and the threshold of a new era, the Philippines has yet to learn how to cooperate under the newly voted president, Cory Aquino. Cory Aquino's ability to always smile, along with her devotion to her family and to her religious faith, those were the things people always talked about when she and her husband were in exile. It was when Benigno Aquino, the main political opponent of Ferdinand Marcos, went back to Manila that all of this happened. Shots were fired and a whole new campaign against Marcos had sparked. Her friends say that was when they learned there was more to Cory than graciousness. And although she didn't understand it at the time, it was during the period of grief that her faith deepened and that her personal tragedy began to touch millions of Filipinos like nothing has ever done before. Then her political career really began.
Her quality of serenity, perhaps is the word, permitted her to keep that coffin open for 9 days. She, in fact, started a political campaign which she herself was unaware of. The millions of people who showed at Ninoy's funeral were the same millions that showed at this election. She will get on her knees and pray. They will be dumbfounded and not know how to handle it. That is, all of those smooth and slick politicians who've been in the business for 35 or 40 years are likely to be very disarmed by a management style that comes out of a confessional booth.
What was so amazing about her campaign was while she had no political experience, she soon showed remarkable political instincts. Her first name, Corazon, means heart, and she told people to call her Cory instead. The people loved it. She only wore yellow, and that reminded her of her husband's funeral. But if it was unlikely that she was the one to drive Ferdinand Marcos away, it may require a miracle. On top of all the problems, she needs to find a solution to bring back control over the military. Cory said herself before that she was what the Philippines needed, someone completely opposite of Marcos. And no one at that time would ever argue that in Cory Aquino, that's what they got.
Despite winning the election, Cory Aquino has to fight another battle. And this time, it's against communist rebels, the New People's Army. These rebels remain a threat to both national security and democracy, with an estimate of 16,000 members.
They've been badly demoralized from a process of degenerating domestic conditions, from cronyism, from corruption and the like, for a number of years. So in terms of their effectiveness as a military instrument, their combat readiness, it's highly suspect.
The military, on the other hand, has over 70,000 men under it. However, despite its initial popularity with civilians, the military image has been tarnished. Almost 2 decades of corruption has done nothing but leave a sour taste in the minds of the people. Coupled with its undisciplined, underpaid, and ill-equipped members, it's a disaster. Despite the U.S. aid, it has raised public concerns about the U.S. military involvement in another guerrilla war. Meanwhile, another debate is happening about Marcos seeking asylum in the U.S.
The corruption and the politicizing by Marcos of the armed forces has been done so deeply that it will take time to professionalize.
Our country has an obligation to help revive and restore the Philippine military, which has quite obviously been distracted from the task of dealing with the insurgency for an extended period of time.
Some U.S. officials say the Philippines needs the same kind of assistance the Pentagon is presently providing El Salvador. If so, that could bring increased public concern about U.S. military involvement in another guerrilla war. This is David Martin.
Joyful, jubilant. Yeah.
You surprised that it came?
No, because we're praying for that for the last 20 years.
Until he had really left, gone out physically, I still would not believe it.
Smiles, laughter, good thoughts about the future, they said, after 20 years of Philippine suffering in the past under the Marcos regime.
What I am worrying now is retaliation of the people that was harmed by the previous administrations.
The feelings is still inside. We can forgive, but we cannot forget. That's the thing about us Filipinos. But
as for a possible asylum for Marcos in the United States, people here oppose it.
Filipinos fought Spaniards, Americans, Japanese, just to get our freedom. And after we got that freedom, only one man took it away from us.
South Jersey just held a special mass last Saturday and prayed for nonviolent change.